This is the Modern Mastery Unleashed podcast.
Welcome to season 2, everyone. Happy New Year. We are super excited to have you back at Modern Self-Mastery Unleashed, the podcast. I'm your host, Natalia Edelman, with my special co-host, as you all know, Paul Davidson. And we have a very special guest today, Stuart Wade. He is a clinical hypnotherapist and founder of SW Performance Coaching. In the right place, as we always talk about breaking through limitations and mastering yourself so that you can break through all the limitations to create a life of lasting success, happiness, health, wealth, and everything that you ever dreamed of. So welcome.
Thank you for having me, guys. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
It is. We've been looking forward to having you on here, Stuart, for quite some time, I have to say. And I was going to go into a whole lot of things that you've done and you've achieved, but I think we want to hear it from you because our listeners here are always fascinated by the stories that got people to where they are, because that's what life's all about. It's just this beautiful journey and mastering yourself and unleashing your brilliance and really just, making a life that you just don't need a vacation from. You know what I mean? So I'm going to let you just share your story, and let's start there, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Okay, sounds good. So with hindsight, as I look back through my story now, I can see how it all ties together and how the path made sense. But going through it at the time, I didn't necessarily know that this was the path that I was going to take in my life. And I didn't know all that much about hypnotherapy when I was younger. I knew about the classic stage hypnosis, get someone dancing around like Elvis or clucking like a chicken or, eating an onion and thinking it's an apple, all that kind of stuff, which isn't what I do, FYI, but it works. It's real. It's not just for show. It does work. So I'll start at the beginning. So I started training in Taekwondo when I was 6 years old. And I was always a big fan of Bruce Lee when I was young. My dad was a big Bruce Lee fan. He was at school during the Bruce Lee boom in the early 70s. And even at such a young age, I always remember him talking about Bruce Lee and doing flying sidekicks across the common room with his friends at school. And so we had the VHS tapes in the house for Enter the Dragon and some of other Bruce Lee's other films. And so I would watch them with my dad. And of course, I just wanted to emulate this amazing guy who was just kicking everyone's ass, and I wanted to emulate that. And my parents started me in a local Taekwondo class. Now, I took to it quite quickly. I had a natural aptitude for it, but I didn't like competition at that time. So I enjoyed learning the techniques. I enjoyed progressing through the belts and doing the gradings and what have you. But I didn't enjoy the competition aspect of it. That came later. Now, I achieved my black belt when I was 8 years old, just before the age of 9. And I then moved to a different club, which was kind of a necessary thing at the time because there was a group that I'd trained with from day one. They all achieved their black belts at the same time, and then they all quit. So I was the only black belt in a class full of white belts. And it's a bit of a saying in martial arts that black belt is just the beginning. They clearly didn't think so. They thought it was the end, so they opted out. But for me, I wanted to keep going, so I found a different club, still nearby, but a different club, slightly different style. And so I went into training over there, and I then started competing. And by this time, I was 10 or 11 years old. I started competing a bit more, and I actually started enjoying it more then, and started having more success. By the age of 13, I represented Great Britain for the first time. And from that point on, pretty much every year until my mid-20s, I represented Great Britain or England in some form of international tournaments in various locations around the world. I did a degree in sport and exercise science at university. My plan while I was at school was to be a car designer, of all things. That was what I wanted to do. Always loved cars, wanted to be a car designer. And I had a terrible graphic design teacher in sixth form, and she pretty much beat that out of me. And I set out to get a good grade just to spite her, in all honesty, which I did. And then but that was it. My car design dreams went by the wayside then. So I did sports science at university. With being a sporty person, doing the martial arts, the competition, all that, that was me. So I did sports science. In the grand scheme of the degree, it was comprised of 3 disciplines: exercise physiology, biomechanics, and sports psychology. And so at this point, once I was at university, I was thinking, oh, well, I'll be a personal trainer. That's what I want to do. So it was more of the fitness side of things that was appealing to me. But learning about sports psychology at the time as well was giving me some more underpinnings in that aspect of things. But I wasn't really conscious of it at the time as being my path. Graduated from uni, went on to do a course as a personal trainer, did that very quickly, and went on as a self-employed personal trainer pretty much straight out of university. I was still competing at this time. By my mid-20s, I'd actually won 4 world titles in Taekwondo and kickboxing, 3 European championships, 20 British championships. So I did all right in my competitive career, but it wasn't something that I wanted to pursue professionally in that respect. I had my sights on being a personal trainer at this time. And early on, as I say, I was still competing at a high level when I was doing the PT work. And I went through a phase where I actually started getting fatigued during competition quite badly. And so much so that it was messing with my head. You know, with hindsight, such a wonderful thing that it is, I could have been training better, for sure. I could definitely have been eating better and fueling myself better for competition. But psychologically, that was the thing that was the problem, because I'd be going into competition worried that I was going to gas out and fatigue and lose again. And so it was just a negative spiral I found myself in. And of course, it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, I got recommended to a local hypnotherapist by a friend of mine. Didn't know too much about it at the time, thought it was a bit weird, bit out there, but was willing to give it a go. And I went to see this guy, and it just really resonated with me as we were doing the sessions, and the shift in my mentality and the way I was feeling about going into competition was almost night and day. It was complete contrast. And so that really opened my eyes then to think, oh, there's something to this weird and wonderful hypnotherapy stuff. Okay. Fast forward a little bit more, and the beginning of 2013, I had just gone through some personal issues. I wasn't in a very good headspace at the time. And I was reading an article in the Daily Mirror newspaper, and Paul McKenna was releasing his latest book at the time on a technique called havening. And so it was a 2-page article about this havening technique, where it came from, what it did, and Paul himself. And there was also a competition within this article, and they were going to pick 3 people. And when I say they, it was Paul, as far as I know, himself was going to pick 3 people from all over the UK to go to his house in central London and for him to do this havening technique with the winners to overcome whatever difficulties they were facing at the time. And so, because of the headspace that I was in, I thought, what the hell, I'm going to enter this competition. I've got nothing to lose, you know. And as luck would have it, I got selected. And so I went down, and upon walking into what was Paul's house, essentially, getting introduced to him, the conversation somehow turned on to Bruce Lee very quickly. And I didn't realize that Bruce Lee was his idol throughout his life as well. So we had a lot in common there from the get-go. Now, he did the havening technique with me, and it was fantastic. It really shifted the way I was feeling at the time.
Can I interject for a second and ask,
Absolutely.
what is the havening technique?
Sure. So it comes under the umbrella of amygdala depotentiation therapies. It combines bilateral stimulation. There's a bit of tapping involved. There's a bit of visualization. It's kind of an amalgamation of a number of different techniques, but there's also the element of touch involved. And I'm going to clarify that real quickly before anybody gets the wrong end of the stick.
You're so being inundated here, mate.
And I'm not qualified in this, just so everybody knows. But so Paul would grab my hand. He'd grab my hand, and as he was giving me these hypnotic suggestions, he would be doing this with his hand. And the professors at, I forget which university it was that developed this technique in America, but the professors that developed the technique found that touching the hands like this and also rubbing on the upper arms here whilst giving the suggestions boosted the release of serotonin in the brain. So it was giving you the feel-good chemicals and hormones whilst getting the hypnotic suggestions and the bilateral stimulation. And it was bypassing essentially the emotional response in the brain. So it worked really well. It worked really well to the point where I just said to Paul at the end of the day, like, I want to get into this industry. I just find everything about what we've just done fascinating. I want to learn this. What do I do? And so he said, look, you should go and train with Dr. Richard Bandler, the co-founder of NLP, because he's my mentor. He taught me everything that I know. You should start there. He runs courses in London. That's where you should start. So that's what I did. I went and studied the course with Bandler, did that. And then through the wonders of Google, I started seeing adverts for a local clinical hypnotherapy qualification. And this particular qualification, they were running a free taster weekend in my hometown. So, of course, why not? Go along, free taster weekend. I don't have to pay anything, even better. And it was great. I absolutely loved it. And with the NLP stuff that I just learned, but also a kind of natural aptitude for it, it just seemed to resonate with me. You know, I've got naturally quite a good voice for it, but I'm also very aware of how to use my voice as well in that kind of context. So I kind of almost had a leg up on some of the other people that were on that taster weekend who'd never done anything like it before. And so in the end, I just had to find the money to do this qualification because it was just speaking to me. I had to do it. And so after some bank account raiding, I got the money, paid up, and from June 2014, I was a fully qualified clinical hypnotherapist, and I've been doing it ever since with clients.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is That is a phenomenal story. And I don't know if you're watching, you'll see all of Stuart's incredible accomplishments behind him. And if you're listening, I will describe that he has, I can't even count how many trophies and just trinkets. It's not trinkets, that's not what I meant, but like, trophies that are just like, speak volumes to your experience. It's incredible, incredible.
Thank you.
And you specialize specifically in weight loss and sports performance and anxiety. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Paul, have you ever been hypnotized?
Well, yes, but we don't need to touch on that.
Because I mean, I've not been hypnotized, and I just think it's absolutely fascinating. And I think there's a lot of people that are, there may be like, oh no, I wouldn't even, and there could be people that are like, I'm so curious. And so when you see people from these different camps, I guess, like how do you talk about hypnotherapy as being this incredible tool when used correctly?
Yeah, so it's interesting because it is gaining more mainstream credence nowadays, and there's more studies going into hypnosis and meditation and things like that. But there is still quite a bit of misconception out there that either you have to be weak-minded to be hypnotized, which is one that I've had quite often, and I would dispute that quite vehemently. As to, I would argue that you have to be quite strong-minded to allow yourself to be comfortable and go with the process. And it's nothing to do with being weak-minded or strong-minded at all. It's a natural phenomenon that we all go through, whether we know it or not, each day. As our brain waves change throughout the day, we enter into some hypnotic states. Typically, when you're either waking up in the morning or going to bed at night, even if you ever find yourself just daydreaming, or if you see somebody just kind of staring into space, that's an indication that the brain waves have slowed down into the alpha brainwave state, and they're actually in the beginnings of hypnosis there. They're quite comfortable. They're aware of what's going on around them, but it's not impacting on them, and they're not thinking a million thoughts at once. They're just very comfortable and content at that time. And that's the beginnings of a hypnotic state. But to answer your question, Natalia, people who have, whether they have objections or whether they're curious, my approach is kind of the same. Talk about the science behind it, how it actually works, the mechanics of it, and give examples of either my own experience of being in hypnosis and or client cases that I've worked with. Yeah.
And this is why we wanted to have you on, Stuart, because there's so much out there that's just like, but when you bring someone like yourself who knows what they're doing, they've got the experience, it's just, we're bringing you guys the experts that you need to know about, is what I'm trying to say here. Sorry, Paul, were you going to say something?
No, I mean, even the example I said, let's not talk about my experience. I mean, even though it was, for entertainment purposes, it just goes to show the power of it. I suppose, to sum it up, for me, with my limited knowledge, is that if you want to get into the operating system quite quickly and make quite a big shift, it's got the ability to collapse time under that process, which I think is probably what most people are looking for. And typically, most things aren't easy or convenient. And of course, you've got to get a little bit uncomfortable, and you've got to let go. And that's probably most people's difficulty, of finding stillness to even let go during a 5-minute stillness meditation, just to quiet the mind and just recenter what they want to think, so they're not on automatic mode, as Dr. Joe Dispenza would say, you know, it's breaking the habit of being yourself, isn't it? And so it's an important part of everybody's world is how you see things, isn't it? Because I think it's one of the biggest mindset shifts that exist is when you move from your perception to perspective is a massive shift. And I think that it just opens up the mind so quickly into possibility that it's just a big shift. It's just a big psychological shift that happens, and it just really collapses time and just really shows you what's possible. And it's even with that ridiculous example of mine, it just goes to show, you know, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, which is Dr. Wayne Dyer, and it sounds stupid, but it really isn't, because how you see things is everything. At the end of the day, it's just fact, it's science, it's fact. But yeah, incredibly powerful. And Stuart's someone that we know, like, and trust. And because it's like anything, you get good and bad in all industries, and Stuart's just of the people, and he's earned his stripes in all cases, and just really wants to serve. So yeah, thanks for being here, mate. And so, what can hypnotherapy be used for? To move on people from being stuck, who are lost, can't find their purpose? Do you touch on that? Because I think a lot of people feel a bit stuck, spinning their wheels. They're inconsistent. They try something, they get stuck. They try something, they get stuck again. So what would your advice be? How could it be used to get people unstuck and into momentum, into creating the life they want?
Yeah, hypnosis can help pretty much everything, genuinely. It's the amount of different people and issues that I've worked with is so vast, and sometimes seemingly so random as well. And even things that Western medicine doesn't have a treatment for or a cure for, I've had personal experience where I've helped someone, not really knowing if the hypnosis itself is going to help that issue, or if it's just going to help them to feel better at the time. But it's actually created a physiological change in that person. And to the point where, even as a clinical hypnotherapist practicing this day in, day out, it's kind of blown my mind a little bit, because even I was skeptical going in that it could have that effect, but it has. And it's exactly what you just said there, Paul. It's opening your mind to the possibilities. And if you are stuck, if you're trying to figure out your path, if you don't know what you want and you're trying to figure that out, all of these questions can be asked and answered, sometimes literally, in hypnosis. That could literally be an approach to where, for example, I would induce a client into a hypnotic state, and that sounds very clinical and whatnot, but it's not really. The client's always in control. They can stop the process if they want to. They're the one in control. I'm just the sat nav guiding them through the experience. So they can relax into that hypnotic state, and I could literally ask them, what do you want to do? What's holding you back from getting to where you want to be? I could start questioning. And because they're in that hypnotic state, the perceptual filters that we all have when we're awake and aware and in the conscious mind, all those are put to one side. And again, to quote what you said earlier, Paul, I'm going into the operating system for the real answer then, without the filtering. So there's many, many approaches that could be used for that, but it can definitely help anybody who's stuck to overcome whatever obstacles they're facing and to get things moving to where they want to be.
You know, the one thing you said there that I think everyone needs to really just pick out there is that your client is always in control. I I actually always thought that it was not that way. And so you just clarifying that, I think, is going to be a big light bulb for a lot of people, because
Yeah.
I think, I mean, that was me, and I don't know anything. I mean, I'm very new to hypnotherapy, clinical hypnotherapy. I'm not even going to pretend to know anything about it, which is why you're here, Stuart. But the fact that you said that the client is in control, they can stop at any time. I think there's a huge misconception, and it's probably because of movies and what we've been conditioned and what we've been told and things like that, that they're not actually in control, that you're the puppet master, so to speak. But you're distilling, I mean, you're blowing away like all these myths around hypnotherapy that I know exists.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Yeah.
I think
This is the
control was a big thing, isn't it? Sorry, Stuart. It's a
no,
big
go
thing,
ahead.
isn't it? If you feel like somebody's on their train of thought, and the thought of letting go is just too big a deal. So I think that is actually a massive thing, what you've picked
Yeah.
up on there. And I think that's a big thing, actually, that if you feel like you're in control and that you can stop the process whenever you like. Um, but then also, I suppose, that do you find that where people actually come into terms with what's holding them back, that some people may not want to go there because all of a sudden you're faced with truth?
Mhm.
So how does that how does that process work when that realization is there? Could you sort of walk us through that? Would that be okay?
Sure. So I'll just backtrack briefly to what we were talking about prior with Natalia there. One of the biggest things with entering into that state of hypnosis, or with a therapist anyway, is having the trust and rapport with the therapist first. Because if that's not there, you're fighting an uphill battle to let go and actually get the outcome and go through the process that you're looking for. So you have to have that trust and rapport with the therapist to start with. And that's, I would argue, that's one of the biggest things going into it, whether you've been hypnotized before or not, if you believe in it or not. If you don't trust me, we're going to struggle. We're going to
Such a
struggle
good
to,
point.
but yeah, so going back to what you were saying there, Paul, there's a concept called secondary gain that I do question clients on a lot, because depending on whatever the issue is, if they derive some kind of benefit from that negative behavior or that negative circumstance or environment, you name it, if they get some kind of benefit from that, that's secondary gain, and that's going to make it more difficult to let go of whatever that thing is in order to move forward. And so sometimes we have to try and get all of this stuff out of the way before even entering into hypnosis. And I always ask that clients be as open and honest with me as they can be. And I even have a question on my intake form that's, is there anything that you don't want to tell me? And 99 times out of 100, it's no, I'm an open book. And I very rarely deal with people withholding things, in all honesty. But if something does come up, it could be verbal resistance, it could be some kind of micro expression, some little let's say a tapping of the foot or something when a particular issue is brought up. So there's some little indicator that something's going on there. And at which point I would then delve a little bit deeper into that if it's in hypnosis, even if it's not in hypnosis as well. Sometimes it would come up in just having a chat. You know, they might be telling me one thing, but the foot's doing a mile a minute on the floor. So that's indicating there's something else going on. So it very much depends on the individual as well as to how yeah, I was going to say confrontational. That's not necessarily the way I would intend that to come across, but how bluntly I could address that thing. If they're very comfortable with me just being straight up and calling them out on something, then we go with that. If they are more likely to shell up even more, I might have to be a little bit more covert about it and ask around it to try and get to the root of what's going on there, if that makes sense. But yeah, there's not so much a one size fits all approach with this. It very much depends on the client as a person and how they are and how they relate to me.
Well,
I hope that answers the question.
Well, it's just excellent. It's just it's mastery of the topic, isn't it? And of the craft. That's the difference, because I did a post about not one size fits all, and I referred to a cap I bought to wear from a popular training company, and it looked like a swimming hat when I put it on, just to which I put on my post to say not one size fits all, because it's right. There's many different ways to the mountaintop. But having said that, do you find that because biology scales, right? So would you say, well, what would you say, rephrase that, what would you say is the most common thing that holds people back from who they want to be, what they want, impact they want to have, income they want to make? I mean, it might not be something you can touch on as such, but does it come back to feelings of unworthiness, or I'm undeserving of that, I haven't given myself permission for that, or something like that? But I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to somebody who's so experienced like yourself to understand what that is. It might help the viewers and listeners.
So while you were asking that question there, Paul, the first thing that came to mind was low self-esteem, low confidence. And that's something that I address with every single client, regardless of what their issue is. Because if they have more confidence, if they have more self-esteem, if they feel worthy, then they're already part way to overcoming that thing, because they believe that they can deal with it better. And so that is one of the fundamental things that we need to address, whatever the issue is. Because as you say, if someone's got some limiting beliefs for whatever reason, and they don't feel worthy enough, they want to achieve something, but I'm not really good enough, or, oh, I can't do that. We can delve into where that's come from, and we can address all that stuff 100%. And that would be one way of undoing all of that. But then we want to build their confidence. And I did a training course once where the therapist that was leading it was talking about backfilling. And I'd never really heard the term in this sort of context before, but it made total sense when he explained it. And it was, if we delve into someone's subconscious and we undo all the negative programming and all the limiting beliefs and all the negative stuff that they've accumulated through their life, if we go in and undo all that, so now there's a shed load of space for something new. And if we leave it at that point, there's a load of space now that they could pick up some negative stuff if we're not careful and fill that space with negative stuff. So we want to backfill that with stuff that's going to boost their confidence. So undo all the negative stuff, bring in some more confidence so that they're feeling good once we've gotten out of that. Because sometimes as well, when people have been holding on to certain limiting beliefs or certain negative thought patterns for such a long time, it almost becomes a part of their identity. And if we go in and undo all that and change all that, it's almost like a bit of an identity crisis, because, well, that was part of me? Who am I then? And, so we go in and sort that out as well, add some more confidence, some more self-esteem, some more worthiness, name your terminology. That's going to help that person to move forward from a better place.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because as we all know, we have a deep human need to be congruent with our identity, right? So that's true, isn't it? Like the ego really doesn't like it if you think, what that now who am I? This is a real problem. So in fact, one of the most experienced coaches of entrepreneurs in the world talks about, you can't get somebody to make big jumps in their life, in their personal, professional career until they feel good about their past. And that's about measuring backwards. And it's an important topic actually for anybody and everybody, because we quite often, and a lot of entrepreneurs are quite often measuring their self against a horizon, which you'll never meet, against an ideal, which you'll never meet because the horizon constantly moves. But if you measure backwards, you'll be happy. And I really like that concept. And he talked about, it's very similar to backfilling. Again, connection was made. But backfilling, he talks about measuring backwards and look at all of the jumps that you've made in your life where you've shifted identity, become a different person in the process. And then you think, well, I've done it before. And I think that's really important, isn't it? Because I think I've had a tendency in the past to be the hardest person on myself ever. And so, like, I can feel like, well, today I just start at zero. Like, nothing counts now. It's like, well, you're never starting from zero, although we feel we are. So, somewhere along the line, you've got a track record in sales, a track record in persuasion, in influencing people, in making money, in happiness. We've all got experience and track record in that, and I think that's a really important part that you talk about there. Because you kind of got to go backwards, haven't you, to move forwards? In fact, haven't you, to feel good about what happened? But everything's identity based. It's so powerful, isn't it? So I think it's incredible work what you do, and I think that must give so many people not just relief, but a new belief center to move from, that I've got now permission and I feel like I'm good enough to do this. I mean, that's practically everything, isn't it?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, I love the the life mapping that you guys are talking about, just going back to your earliest memory and just jotting down those notes. And I think, well, what I'll do is we'll put a life map in the premium membership. So if anyone's listening and you want access to the premium membership, we'll put a link below. But I don't want to sidetrack from what Stuart's saying, because I think there's still some of us that are wondering, like, how exactly does hypnosis work? Because you talked about backfilling, you've talked about, you've talked about sort of the client journey almost. So you have an intake form, and then you have almost like a conversation and seeing, are you ready to enter into this hypnotic state, right? And then if you're not, then you work with them to get them to that point. And then when they're ready for the hypnosis, like, how does that part work? Because I'm fascinated. I'm just hanging on every word that you're saying here, Stuart.
Sure. So it's, in all honesty, it can be a little bit underwhelming because I joke about it in that, the initial consultation that I do with a client is very much a give and take. I ask them questions, I make notes on their answers, I delve a little bit deeper. It's very much a back and forth interaction. And I often say to them, right, now the hard bit's done. You just need to chill You just need to relax and let me talk at you now. And this is the thing. If they are comfortable enough with me, as long as they trust me, as I alluded to earlier, all I get them to do initially is to close their eyes as soon as they're comfortable, and they can be sitting up or lying down, whichever they prefer. Close their eyes and focus on the breathing. And sometimes I'll get them to breathe in a particular way. For instance, if they are going through some anxiety, or if they're quite an anxious person anyway, I'll get them to do the physiological sigh breathing of a double inhale and a slow exhale double inhale through the nose and a slow exhale through the mouth. I'll get them to do that for a few breaths just to calm the nervous system down before I start giving suggestions. If they're just ready to go, I just get them to focus on the breathing and just slow the breathing down. By whatever way they feel comfortable slowing their breathing down, it's going to reduce their sympathetic nervous system activation and increase the parasympathetic nervous system activation, which is the rest and digest nervous system. That's the system that calms everything down. We're not under threat. We don't need to be awake and aware and ready for action right now. We can just relax. So the breathing starts that process. And when they breathe like that, their heart rate slows down a little bit as well. Their blood pressure will reduce. And then I might start to get them to focus on their muscles. Then this works really well if they're a physical person. If they've got a good amount of proprioception and awareness in the body, I'll get them to think about the muscles and relax each muscle one by one. And I'll call out the muscle. I'll get them to focus on certain areas to just relax and let that go, because that is just helping to increase, again, that parasympathetic nervous system activation, but it's also going to reduce their brain waves down from the beta state into the alpha state. And then hopefully we get into the theta state, which is where we operate in hypnosis. That's where the magic happens, where the filters of the conscious mind are put to one side. And that's where I can literally go into the operating system and talk to their subconscious to fire and wire new neural pathways in the brain, which I've thrown a lot of jargon out there just then. But in practice, what that actually looks like is the client is either sitting up or lying down with their eyes closed, breathing slowly, and I am talking to them, giving them directions, giving them suggestions. Sometimes it's very direct. As I say, think about your shoulders, relax those muscles. It might be direct like that. It might be a bit more abstract. It might be a visualization. You're walking in a field. It's a beautiful summer's day. There's a light breeze coming across the field. It depends on what I'm doing. It depends on the type of person that I'm with and what resonates with them, because I want to be speaking their language subconsciously. If they're a visual person, I'm giving them lots of visual cues. If they're more kinesthetic, I'm giving them lots of feelings. It's all about getting the right language to speak to them, to get them into as deep a hypnotic state as we can to do the work. And while they're in this state, they might be with me all the way. They might hear every single word that I'm saying and be able to visualize everything or feel everything or hear everything, even smell and taste the things that I'm giving them the suggestions for. Or they might not. They might be, for want of a better phrase, away with the fairies. They might not be listening to me consciously, but it still has the effect. And I'll give you an example of this. When I first qualified, in fact, no, this was while I was training, because you have to do, I think it was 100 hours of actual in-person live practice that I had to do and document for my qualification. And I was doing this session with one of my personal training clients back in the day. And so we'd known each other a while. He trusted me, so it was going to be fine. He was sitting in his chair, big armchair, he's big guy, 6'3", 18 stone, big bloke. And he had his arms on the armrest. And very quickly, he was snoring like you would not believe. Like it almost felt like the house was shaking. He was snoring so loudly. And so as I say, I'm still a trainee at this point. So I'm trying to keep on top of my tonality. I'm reading from the script that I'm giving him. And all I'm thinking in my head is, this guy's fallen asleep. They've lied to us on the course. They said you couldn't fall asleep in hypnosis. They've lied. And so I had all this going around in my head. But there's something that you can do in a situation, not necessarily exclusively in a situation like that, but what worked well in a situation like that is something called an ideomotor response. And I'll just lift my arm up so you can see here. So imagine this is his arm on the armrest of the chair. Like I say, he was snoring like crazy. I wasn't even sure that he could hear my voice at this point. And I just said, if you can hear me and you understand everything that I'm telling you, elevate your right index finger now. Boom. His finger went straight up. And I just said, okay, and you can relax it down now. And it went down. And I thought, right, okay. So he's still with me, even though he's snoring and it looks for all intents and purposes like he's asleep. His subconscious mind is listening to me. And so that's an indication of where the magic happens. You know, it looked like he was asleep, but actually he wasn't. He was there. He was with me. He was engaged. And so, I've kind of forgotten how I got onto that story now, but there you go. Little illustration for you.
Amazing. Because I was asking you how hypnosis was working, and then next question was going to be like, how do you know it works? And then you just had you put in the example perfectly. I think that's so fascinating and absolutely hilarious at the same time.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant, isn't it? And just the depth of the driving power of the subconscious mind. I mean, that tells all, doesn't it? Really, that's the driving engine behind the behaviors, isn't it? Which are deeply hardwired sets of behaviors from beliefs, aren't they? And I think rewriting that story is incredibly powerful, isn't it? I mean, that's just incredible. But I mean, I find that example so fascinating. The guy's roaring, and yet he can lift his finger. I mean, that's just amazing, isn't it? I mean, that really goes to show the power of the subconscious mind in such a simple example of how it actually works. I love that. I think that's absolutely amazing. But that's the thing. I mean, you might be inundated after this, Stuart. But that's the thing that you say, because it's so psychological. There's not much that you can't help, is there? Just because of the belief center, isn't it? I mean, it's just absolutely amazing, really. Our capabilities, our limitlessness. It really is, isn't it? And just how we have so many glass ceilings formed over by these stories and these deeply held beliefs, and what fires together wires together. And I think that by getting into that operating system so rapidly, it fascinates me. I mean, that's obviously why we've got you on, but it fascinates me and Natalia and probably most people who don't know a great deal about it. And I think it's great to bring awareness to something that can help so many people, because I think, on a macro level, my goodness me, doesn't the world need it?
Oh, yeah.
When we really need it. I think people are searching for empowerment of themselves. Like, people are waking up, aren't they? They know that there's power within them. And I think one of the most painful experiences, talking from personal experience, that unexpressed potential turns to pain. And it gets very painful the moment you become aware that hang on, what's all this about? Well, no, I don't agree with that. I want to do this, and I feel that I've got all this potential within me, but somehow I can't get it out, and I don't know where to direct it. It's probably one of the most painful things in life, and I think that a practice of what you do alleviates that for so many people, and that's obviously why we run the podcast. We want to serve humanity and empower the world to become who they're capable of becoming. I mean, that's why we're here. So thank you for that incredible insight.
You're very welcome. And I'll just piggyback on to the back of that, Paul, as well, because it can help psychological issues, emotional issues, and even physical issues. That's one of the biggest almost points of contention, to where, you know, it's all in your head. Like, well, if there's a physical issue going on that this can help, which it definitely can, and I've got numerous examples that I could throw at you with that, then it just goes to show the power of the subconscious mind. And as you say, the stories that we tell ourselves and the layering that gets put on top of what's going on in our psyche and in our nervous system as well. It's very powerful, and like you say, the world definitely needs some empowerment right now.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's quite an interesting, but one of our closest friends, he used to be a carpet fitter. He's in his 70s now, and he's proper old school, this guy, and we love him to bits. So his wife's, if you're walking past the house, his wife, Rachel, she'll say, "Oh, come in," and she'll bake scones, just fresh, just bake them. Got the Aga going. She'll bake fresh scones out in sort of 10 minutes. Away you go. Just the amazing people, and they've done so much for us over the years. And her husband, he hasn't been able to lift his right arm up above his head for probably 20 years, right? So he has to use his other arm to lift his arm up when he's getting dressed in the morning, and he's in so much pain. He's been sleeping downstairs and everything. So it's caused quite a lot of problems. And anyway, not that I'm a trained practitioner in massage or sports massage, easy for me to say. But I tend to sort the family out with a table that the wife bought me, just because I kind of know muscles and what to release and stuff. So I just help people out, you know, as best I can. And anyway, so I got drafted in to sort third out, right? And he said, well, I've been to the chiropractor, and he said, look, you've got a frozen shoulder, and that's just how it is, and I can't do nothing with that. It's just how it is. And I said, oh, you'd be surprised. I said, a little bit of loosening off. I said, this, you know, you'll probably be okay. I said, we can have a go. I said, I can't promise anything. I said, but it's amazing what changes you can make. And anyway, so I loosened off his shoulders and his traps and his triceps and all that. His forearms are absolutely like stone. Everything was rock hard. And anyway, so I released all that off just relatively gently. And he sat up and he put his arms straight in the air. And he was like, oh my God. And his wife said, oh my God, he hadn't done that for 20 years. I thought you had a frozen shoulder. And all of this, and it's quite interesting because we were talking to Kaz, who talks about the myofascial release and all of that stuff, and she'd also looked at, you know, I suppose it is what it is, but bodies when we're no longer alive, and that a lot of the ailments of movement and all of that don't exist. That everything moves freely. You know, so was it there or not? So that it was quite an interesting thing, and it really got me thinking. Like, we popped up there at Christmas. I said, "How are you doing? Can you still do your party trick?" And he's like, "Yeah, my arm's fine." and it's just the most amazing thing ever. You know what I mean? So, was it really what I did, or just the possibility that it could be okay? So, like, say, I don't know. It's probably 50-50. I don't know. But it was an interesting physical experience for him, just because he's been able to do something he hasn't been able to do for so long. So it can't just be physical, surely.
That's it. I don't know on the percentages, could be 50-50, could be 60-40, who knows? But there's definitely a physical component and a psychological, neurological component as well. And I'll give you one of the examples on this sort of topic as well. It was not long after I'd qualified, actually, when I was still full-time doing my personal training work. And I was in the gym one morning waiting for my client to come in for her session. And this, just to paint the picture of this client, she trained with me like 4 times a week. She was super fit. She loved it. And she came in for her session that morning and she was limping like she'd been shot, like, limping like you wouldn't believe. So, of course, my first question is, what the hell have you done and what are you doing here? Yeah. And she said that she thought she might have a trapped nerve in her back because she'd barely slept all night. She'd been having shooting pains up and down her legs. So, of course, my follow-up question again was, what are you doing here? How are we going to do any exercise with this? You need to see somebody else. But she wanted to try. And she couldn't even start the cross trainer moving at no resistance. She was in so much pain. Fortunately, she had been a guinea pig for me when I was doing my hypnotherapy qualification. We'd known each other a long time, so she trusted me. Mm-hmm. And in another fortunate turn of events, the GP room, we called it at the gym, so the massage table and all the other medical equipment, the room was free and unlocked, which was a bonus because it was a Saturday morning and I had no keys or anything. So I was able to go in there with her and do some impromptu hypnosis. Now, as I've alluded to a number of times on this podcast, I like to do an intake form and a consultation and really get to the root of what's going on before I actually do the hypnosis. There was no time for that with this today, on this particular day. So I got her onto the massage bed at an angle. So she wasn't laying flat. She was on a sort of 45-50 degree angle with her body. The legs were flat on the bed there. And I had to improvise. Just had to completely come out with something off the cuff. And this was an example of where I did something a bit more abstract. I got her to visualize some symbols and I started questioning her on what shape was the pain? What did it look like? What's the texture? Are the sharp corners? Is it smooth? What colors are involved? And I started getting a lot of imagery going on in terms of symbolism. And this was all being fed back to me from her in real time. And so then I was giving her suggestions for changing the shape, getting rid of it, etc., etc. I'll not go into all the details. 25 minutes later, I had kind of exhausted the material that I could think of off the top of my head. And so I brought her back to full conscious awareness. And the first thing that she did was she jumped off the massage bed and picked her hoodie and car keys up off the floor, having bent double to get them. Then she stood up and she realized what she'd just done. And then she started twisting her body and lifting her legs up. And she's going, I can't feel a thing. This is great. I can't feel a thing. And so, of course, in my head, I'm doing backflips. It actually worked. I can't believe it. It worked. And I didn't plan it or anything. And so at that point, I'm like, well, go and see the physio, please. Get him to put his hands on and do all the checks and manipulations that he needs to do to make sure that physically everything's okay. And hopefully on you go. And sure enough, she did. There was nothing physically wrong. So from being awake all night, shooting pains up and down the legs, to barely being able to walk normally, 25 minutes of hypnosis, abstract hypnosis at that, and the pain's gone, and no physical reason as to why the pain was there in the first place. So rationalize that how you will, but there was something going on subconsciously, neurologically with her that was causing that issue. And the work that we did in that moment, it unlocked that issue and it released the pain that she was experiencing. So it's a powerful thing, like you say, physical, mental, nervous system, all of that. It's definitely a holistic thing. It's not exclusive to one domain.
So what an amazing example. And it just goes to show, I think Kaz was talking about this as well, but I suppose it makes brutal common sense. But if there's a lot of tightness and stress in the mind, it tends to translate into the body, doesn't it? So for anybody who's listening, I think it's good just to sit down and just close your eyes, and just sometimes you need to close your eyes so you're sensorily blind so that you can finally see, because you can go into your internal world and calm everything down and perhaps even ask yourself, how am I feeling? You know, what is this pain? Where's this pain coming from? You know, what's causing that? You know, what am I stressed about? And just having a bit of a check-in, you know, a Monday morning meeting with yourself, you know, to understand where this tightness and stress is coming from. But like you say, like most people or all people are not trained to do any type of inner work. We're looking for something out there. You know, we're doing the Wayne Dyer and the car keys underneath the street light, aren't we? We're doing that because we're looking for the solution to the problem out there when it's in here. And that's where hypnosis is so incredibly powerful, isn't it? It's like rewiring belief system and worldviews. It's in such a short space of time. I think the work you do is incredible. I really do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for everyone who's listening or watching, there's a few really key things, sort of dispelling some of the myths around hypnosis that I know we've done today, because I'm certainly much clearer on and much more open, you know, the fact that client's in control, the fact that, you know, you are a trusted clinical hypnotherapist who has incredible knowledge about the body, who has incredible discipline, and who's accomplished incredible things. But you also have the science-backed approach, which to me is so important, and it sets you apart from, I mean, a lot, if not all, the hypnotherapists that I've ever come across, because I've never actually talked to people about, and I've never had it explained to me about, you know, your nervous system and how that operates, and how when you're in this hypnotic state. And I just think it's incredible. And I know that people are like, okay, Nat, I just want to know where I can get more of Stuart now. Can you please stop and just tell me where I can find this man, because I need to work with him. And you know, like, are there different ways people can work with you? Where can we find you? I mean, certainly your links and your social links will be around the podcast, but let's just maybe close off there, because it's been absolutely fascinating, Stuart. Thank you.
No, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the time, you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as for working with me, I mean, I do sessions in person for people who are in my local area, or also in London, because I do have some clients down there that I commute down to see now and again. But I actually do a lot of sessions online now. And I was a bit skeptical at how well that would work before I actually tried it. And it actually works really well, provided we both have a stable internet connection. We're good to go, you know. But yeah, in terms of finding me, I'm actually going through a bit of a rebrand at the moment as well. But so I'll let you know when that's all finalized. But at the moment, my website is swperformancecoaching.co.uk. My Instagram handle is at hypnoptstu, all one word. And Facebook's just Stuart Wade. And LinkedIn, I am Stuart Wade. It's a really long name. I can't remember it. Stuart Wade, sports performance and weight loss specialist. That's the one.
Don't worry,
and,
we'll put your links everywhere.
Yes, thank you. But yeah, and I just thought I'd give you guys a little technique for your listeners as well, just real quickly while we're on the call here. So this kind of touches on what you were saying not too long ago, Paul, about checking in with yourself. So a technique that I quite like to do with a lot of clients is a technique called color breathing. And for me, being quite a visual person, it really works well, but it's also very simple. So even if you're not as visual as I might be, you can still understand what's going on with it. So in essence, you sit down, lie down, make yourself comfortable, and take a few deep breaths to just slow and calm the system down. Then, using your imagination, start to imagine a color that represents some kind of negative to you, whether it's some physical pain or some anxiety or whatever it might be, something negative. Assign a color to that thing and imagine that you're breathing that color out with every exhale. And I often liken that to, you're outside on a cold winter's day and you breathe out and you can see your breath. That's exactly how I see it in my mind's eye, but the breath is that color rather than just translucent. So do that for, say, 5 breaths. Then imagine a positive color, something that you want more of right now, more confidence, pain-free, healthier, whatever it is. Whatever that color is that your mind brings to you, imagine that you're inhaling that color. So forget about the negative color for a moment. Focus on inhaling the positive color for 5 breaths. And then when you've done that for 5, put the 2 together. Inhale the positive color, exhale the negative color. Do that for 5 breaths. And I would almost guarantee that you will feel better than you did before you started it. And it won't take you long to do either. A couple of minutes. Obviously, don't do it when you're operating heavy machinery or driving. Yeah, it kind of goes without saying, but you have to say it. Eyes closed helps as well, like you were saying earlier, just gets away from the visual distractions so you can just be fully in your mind and your imagination. But yeah, it's a really simple technique. Doesn't take long, but you might be surprised at how quickly it can work and help you to feel better than you did even a few moments before. Just thought I'd slip that in there for you guys, for your listeners anyway. But yeah.
Bonus, everybody. My goodness. Wasn't expecting that, Stuart. Thank you.
No problem.
We're so appreciative of your time and just your brilliance, your fabulous brilliance. It's just been incredible. And we will see you all next time. So thanks so much for tuning in. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.